The note in the empty house. I returned home for Thanksgiving and found silence. No clatter of pans, no aroma of roasted turkey, just the ticking of a clock and the slow creak of a rocking chair in the living room. Sitting in that chair was Walter, my husband's stepfather, gaunt, gray-bearded, one eye watching me, the other seemingly lost in some memory. I dropped my bag by the door. My fingers were cold, but not from the November air. On the hallway table lay a folded note, written in the sharp, impatient handwriting of my husband, Caleb, gone on a cruise with Hannah. Mom joined last minute, needed the break. You'll stay with Walter, he needs you, back Monday. See, I read it again, then a third time, but the words didn't change. They sat on the paper like a verdict. Behind me, Walter's voice rasped, "Didn't expect that, did you?" I turned, unsure if I should laugh, cry, or collapse. "No," I said quietly. "No one told me." Walter nodded slowly, as if this betrayal had been expected, maybe even rehearsed. "Left you with the leftovers," he muttered. "Just like they always do." I had arrived with a car full of groceries, gifts, and table decor, all ready for a festive meal that now existed only in my imagination. Caleb hadn't picked up my last 3 calls. His silence, I'd told myself, was stress, the holidays. But now, the truth was written plainly in front of me. He'd left, with Hannah, the office colleague I never fully trusted but never dared confront. I pulled out my phone. A notification blinked at the top. Instagram, Caleb, smiling, champagne in hand, arm wrapped tightly around Hannah. The caption, "New traditions, Caribbean sun, family time." Family, the word burned, my vision blurred, not from tears, from fury. "They've done it before," Walter said softly, standing now with the aid of his cane. "To me, to anyone who makes life less convenient, they don't leave, they vanish." I turned to him. "You knew?" He nodded. "I've been watching them walk away for years." A fireplace without flames, I sat at the edge of the kitchen table, clutching my phone as if staring long enough might summon Caleb back. But there were no calls, no messages, just that grinning photo from the cruise ship, a celebration I hadn't been invited to, funded, apparently, by our savings. Walter slowly lowered himself into the kitchen chair across from me. The house was quiet. Not cozy quiet, abandoned quiet. No scent of food, no warmth from the fireplace, just the hollow air of a place forgotten. Thanksgiving, I murmured bitterly, placing the phone down, was supposed to be at his mother's house. They planned it for months. The whole family was coming. Walter let out a low, breathy chuckle. "Funny thing about that family, they plan things for you, not with you." I stood, paced toward the refrigerator. It was almost empty. A jug of milk gone sour. 2 takeout boxes. No leftovers. No turkey. Just evidence of haste, of someone leaving without care. I closed the fridge with a hollow thud. "Caleb's been distant for weeks," I said, mostly to myself. Said work was stressful, that he was too tired to talk, that he needed time alone to think. Walter snorted. He needed time to pack. Hannah's been calling this house since September. Told him not to bring her up, but he's always sloppy, like his mother. I froze. "You knew about the affair?" I suspected. He said, tracing the rim of his glass with a crooked finger. "I'm old, not stupid." There was no defense I could make. No way to rationalize Caleb's absence now. He had made a choice, and it wasn't me. I opened the banking app on my phone. I needed clarity and instead found devastation. 3 days ago, $6,000 had been withdrawn. Almost the entire savings Caleb and I had built for a down payment on our first home. Gone. My hand trembled as I showed the screen to Walter. He took everything. Walter leaned back, expression grim but unsurprised. "He's done the same to me for years. A little here, a little there, for your care, Walter," they'd say, while they lowered the thermostat and rationed my meds. I stared at him. "You mean they've been withholding? Painkillers, appointments, food." He shrugged as if describing the weather. "Elaine calls it tough love. I call it quiet cruelty. It wasn't just betrayal, it was design. They'd left me behind not just because I was inconvenient, but because I had become irrelevant. A woman to hold down the house while they toasted freedom somewhere warm. Walter took a slow sip of water, then locked eyes with me. You're not the first to be discarded by them, but maybe you can be the last. I didn't know what he meant. Not yet, but something in the weight of his gaze told me this holiday was not going to end the way they had planned. The folder on the table, it was barely noon, yet the day already felt hollow, as if the world had shifted and left me behind. I stared at the banking screen again, still hoping the numbers would change, that some glitch would return our savings. But reality never glitches the way we want it to. I was still frozen in that thought when Walter slowly stood, shuffled over to a drawer near the kitchen pantry, and pulled out a worn manila folder. He placed it in front of me without a word. "What's this?" I asked. His voice was matter-of-fact. "Proof." Inside, photocopies of bank transfers, lists of missing medications, statements from clinics never visited, receipts for supplies that never arrived. Scrawled notes in Walter's surprisingly neat handwriting documented everything: dates, times, descriptions. "They think I'm senile," he said, tapping his temple, "but I've been keeping track. Every time they forgot my prescription. Every time a doctor's visit was canceled because insurance wouldn't cover it." My stomach twisted as I flipped through the evidence. This isn't just neglect. Walter looked at me with eyes sharper than I'd seen in anyone all day. "No, this is theft and abuse and abandonment, but now they've made a mistake." I glanced up. "What mistake?" "They left me with you." That stopped me. "They think you're fragile," he continued. "That you'll cry, maybe call your sister, stay quiet, but you're smarter than that. I've seen it already. You're not here to fold, you're here to fight." I didn't know what to say. Maybe he was right. Maybe the sting of betrayal was giving me clarity and strength I hadn't felt in years. Walter slid a smaller envelope across the table. "Inside is the real will," he said, voice softer. "Not the one Elaine forged with her lawyer friends. This one names you as the sole executor. If you're willing to help me, there's still time to make things right." I didn't reach for the envelope. Not yet. Because justice wasn't something I'd ever imagined delivering, and certainly not alongside a man I barely knew a day ago. But as I looked into Walter's weary, unblinking eyes, I realized something that sent a chill through me. I wasn't the only one they'd discarded, and if we wanted to be seen again, truly seen, we'd have to force their eyes open. I finally touched the envelope. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Walter leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. "Help me tell the truth," he said, loud enough that they can't bury it. The first move that night, I didn't sleep. While Walter rested in his recliner, I sat at the kitchen table with every document, statement, and note he had compiled. My laptop screen glowed against the dark windows, illuminating the birth of something I had never thought myself capable of. A plan. Not for revenge, but for clarity, for control, for a reckoning. I scanned every document, labeled every file, sorted and organized everything Walter had quietly tracked over the last 2 years. I saw it all. The bank withdrawals labeled home care that had gone to luxury handbags, the missed prescriptions, the unpaid utilities while Elaine posted vacation photos. Walter had been neglected, robbed, and gaslit, and now left behind to die in silence, but not anymore. By sunrise, I had created a digital timeline, a visual record of their cruelty, a narrative they couldn't rewrite. When Walter woke, he looked more pale than the day before, but his mind was sharper than ever. He smiled weakly at the sight of the folders stacked neatly beside a steaming cup of tea. "You stayed up all night." "I needed to see the whole picture," I replied, placing the cup in his hand, "and now I do." Walter took a sip, then nodded toward a leather-bound journal on the shelf. "There's more. That one's handwritten. The days I didn't trust technology." I grabbed it, leafing through the entries. Each page chronicled neglect with brutal honesty. Skipped medications, skipped meals, whispered comments he pretended not to hear. They read like a eulogy written before death. That afternoon, we got our first call from the outside world. It was Melissa, Caleb's younger sister. Her tone was light, detached. "Hey, just checking in, how's Walter doing?" I could hear waves in the background. Laughter, champagne clinks. Walter gestured for me to put her on speaker. "Melissa," he rasped, his voice shaking from more than just age. "I'm still alive, sorry to disappoint." A pause. "Oh, I didn't mean, I was just, are you okay?" "Never better," he replied flatly. "Enjoy the cruise." He hung up without another word, then he turned to me. "That's our first crack." We decided then to lean into the narrative, not lies, but the truth emphasized. The neglect, the absence, the abandonment. With Walter's permission, I took a series of photos. Him in the hospital bed he hated. Oxygen machine beside him. Me beside him, no makeup, eyes red with exhaustion. I composed a message. Calm, clinical, just enough detail to draw guilt and suspicion. Walter had a rough night, low oxygen, pain is increasing, we're doing what we can, we'll update. We sent it to Melissa, knowing full well she'd share it with the rest. She replied within minutes. "Poor Uncle Walter, let me know if he gets worse. I'll tell Mom and Caleb." Walter smirked. Hook set. He looked at me with a mix of amusement and sadness. "You know, I didn't expect to have help at the end of my life, but I think I found it, and it came wrapped in betrayal." I sat beside him, placed my hand gently over his. "We're not done yet," I said. "You're not invisible, not anymore." Outside, the leaves fell silently from the trees. Inside, something else was falling, the illusion that they'd left behind nothing but silence. We were writing our own version of Thanksgiving, and this time they would be the ones left speechless. Witnesses in the neighborhood, we needed more than photos, more than sad texts and quiet silences. We needed witnesses. Walter had lived in this neighborhood for over 3 decades. He wasn't just an old man behind a door, he was someone people remembered. Someone who had once loaned tools, helped fix fences, and handed out full-sized candy bars on Halloween. So we invited them in. The first knock came that afternoon, Mrs. Lenora Gray, a retired librarian from across the street. "I saw the driveway empty on Thanksgiving," she said, setting down a small casserole dish. "Knew something wasn't right." Over tea, she told me about last month, how Walter had fallen on the front lawn, calling out for help while Caleb ignored him from the living room. "My husband Harold had to climb the steps and bang on the window. Caleb just shrugged, said Walter was being dramatic." I took notes. Every word. The next day, it was Mr. Delgado, the former firefighter from 2 doors down. "Elaine used to have groceries delivered," he said, "but half the time they never brought essentials. One winter, I found Walter outside, shoveling snow with a broken rake." 5 more neighbors followed. Each one came with their own version of the same story. Walter forgotten, Walter dismissed, Walter left behind. With their permission, I recorded brief statements. "They thought he'd fade quietly," I said to Walter as I organized the footage. Instead, his stories growing louder. He chuckled weakly from his chair. "I've never been viral before." That night, we crafted one more performance. I called Caleb's phone. As expected, it went to voicemail. I took a deep breath, then pressed record. "Caleb, I need you. Walter's not doing well. He's asking for you. Please call me." I recorded similar messages every few hours, each one more urgent, more strained. Walter, between naps, helped direct the tone. "Add a pause after need you. It makes it feel real, like you're struggling." He was right. By the 3rd message, even I believed it. Meanwhile, we staged photos of Walter's decline. He wore an oxygen mask connected to an empty tank Patricia's brother had delivered. We positioned his old hospital bed, added medical tubing, scattered prescription bottles. It looked hauntingly authentic. "Light the room from above," Walter coached, "so my face looks hollow." He wasn't just playing sick, he was sick. But now he was using the same manipulation they once used, not to hide the truth, but to amplify it. After each shoot, we sent carefully chosen images to Melissa, knowing she'd pass them along. With every reply, "Oh no," or "Poor Uncle Walter," we gathered timestamps, patterns, confirmations, and then came the call. Melissa on video blinking into the camera. "He looks terrible," she gasped. "Should we come back early?" I tilted the camera slightly to show Walter, pale and unmoving beneath the sheets. "That's up to you," I said gently. "But he keeps asking for Caleb, says he wants to say goodbye." Melissa's voice cracked. "I'll talk to them." She ended the call. We sat in silence afterward. "That's the first fracture," I whispered. Walter looked toward the window. "They're beginning to squirm." He closed his eyes and whispered again. "Let them." The letters they never expected. The morning after Melissa's call, we received a quiet knock at the door. It was Patricia, Walter's attorney, tall, silver-haired, precise. She stepped inside like she already knew what we were about to ask. "I've brought the updated documents," she said. "And the notary." Behind her, Mr. Lewis, a quiet, sharp-eyed notary in his 50s, carried a briefcase and a solemn expression. Walter was already dressed. Despite his increasing weakness, he insisted on sitting at the formal dining table, his back straight, his eyes steady. "This won't take long," he said, voice thin but unwavering. Patricia began the process, transferring full control of Walter's true estate, 3 private trusts, offshore accounts, a property in Vermont, and a considerable amount of untouched retirement investments. All redirected to me and to 3 elder advocacy organizations that Walter had researched meticulously from his recliner at 3 a.m. "I want the next forgotten soul to have a fighting chance," he whispered as he signed the last document. Patricia nodded solemnly. "You've made that possible." But Walter wasn't finished. He looked up at Mr. Lewis. "Now we record." We set up a tripod in the living room. Walter insisted on using his old camcorder, not my phone. "Feels more official," he said. And then he began, not with bitterness, not with rage, but with disappointment. "To my family," he began, his voice trembling but clear, "by the time you watch this, I'll be gone. Though I imagine you'll be more shocked by the contents of my will than by my absence." He spoke of the missed holidays, the quiet betrayals, the feeling of becoming a burden long before his body began to fail. "I don't blame you for living your lives. I blame you for pretending I didn't exist while you lived them." He detailed the canceled doctor visits, the ignored prescriptions, the moments he'd cried from pain alone. And then he said it. "The only person who saw me in these final days was the one you left behind. And for that, she will carry on what you tried to erase." He ended not with anger, but with one last request. "Don't fight this. Accept it, and maybe be better next time." Even the notary blinked back emotion. Later that evening, Patricia helped us stage the final phase of the documentation. The home now resembled the hospice it had always silently been. Oxygen tanks positioned with care, Roman IV stands carefully placed for photos, medical files sorted by date. Walter lay in bed, exhausted but radiant. "You look tired," I said, pulling the covers over him. "I am, but it's a good tired," he replied. "Like when you finish building something and finally sit back to admire it." I smiled, trying to hold back the lump in my throat. Patricia placed a cream-colored envelope on the mantel, addressed in Walter's elegant cursive handwriting. "To my family, read this before you speak." The next morning, Walter requested one final thing, the bottle of port he had been saving for his 50th wedding anniversary, a celebration he never reached. "I'd like to share it now," he said, "with someone who made these last few days feel like life again." We sipped in silence, to dignity, to truth, to endings that finally feel like justice. That night, as the first flakes of snow whispered against the windows, Walter closed his eyes and never opened them again. The house that remembered Monday morning arrived in pale gray light. I stood in the living room of the quiet house, dressed in black, not as a symbol of grief, but of resolve. Walter's rocking chair sat motionless beside the fireplace. The cream envelope rested on the mantel, framed by the family photo I had studied a dozen times now. In it, Caleb and Elaine beamed at the camera, while Walter stood slightly apart, barely noticed. But not today. At exactly 12:17 p.m., tires crunched on the gravel driveway, doors slammed. Laughter echoed, the unmistakable sound of returning privilege. I didn't move. The front door swung open. Caleb entered first, carrying duty-free bags and wearing a wide, post-cruise grin. Elaine followed in oversized sunglasses and a designer tracksuit. Behind them, Melissa and then Hannah, the woman who had replaced me without ever having the decency to announce her arrival. "Honey, we're ho," Caleb stopped mid-sentence. He had seen me. My arms were crossed, my expression unreadable. Elaine blinked. "What's with the funeral outfit?" I stepped forward calmly. "Walter passed away Saturday night." Silence, then plastic bags dropped to the floor. Hannah stepped back as if the word death might touch her. "What do you mean passed?" Melissa asked, paling. "He died peacefully," I said. "After finalizing his estate, saying what he needed to say, and recording everything you failed to." Elaine's voice sharpened. "You held the funeral without us." He asked for a quiet service. The neighbors came, his former colleagues, his nurse. You were invited, repeatedly. You chose not to answer. Caleb stammered. "I didn't know it was that serious." "I called, I left voicemails. I sent Melissa pictures. He asked for you, Caleb, every single day." I picked up the envelope from the mantel and handed it to him. "This is from him. He wanted it read before anyone speaks." Caleb unfolded the letter with trembling hands. His eyes scanned Walter's last message, and with every line, the color drained from his face. He said I abandoned him," he mumbled. "That I siphoned money?" Elaine ripped the letter from his hand and scanned it. "This is ridiculous." He was confused. Jade manipulated him. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up the remote and pressed play. On the screen, Walter, sitting tall, articulate, devastatingly clear, he told them everything. The neglected medications. The stolen savings. The cold words overheard behind closed doors. And finally, the reason they were standing in front of me now, shocked, speechless, and rapidly unraveling. "I leave my estate to Jade Mitchell, the only person who treated me like I still mattered." Elaine's jaw trembled. Melissa backed toward the door. Caleb looked at me like I had become a stranger. I pointed to the folders on the table, bank records, medical neglect, testimony from 6 neighbors. Walter's will signed and notarized. Even the hospice nurse's final statement was there. And then, just as Patricia arrived at the door with Mr. Lewis, I said calmly, "You can scream, you can deny, but you can't undo this." Patricia stepped forward. "By authority granted in Mr. Harmon's will, I am here to confirm the legal transfer of all property and assets to Jade Mitchell, and to initiate a full audit into the financial abuse perpetrated by the family members named herein." Elaine staggered backward. "This is theft. You're a gold digger." "No," I replied, voice cool. "I'm a witness to your cruelty, and now its executor." Melissa whispered, "What about the house?" Patricia turned to her. "The house was never in Elaine's name. It belongs to a private trust now under Jade's control." Caleb finally snapped. "You tricked him, you took advantage." I stayed, I interrupted. "That's all it took. Staying, cooking, listening, being human while you took a cruise." Elaine lunged for the video remote. Patricia stopped her with a glance. "Try to destroy anything, and you'll face criminal charges." It's all been backed up. Their legacy wasn't collapsing, it had already collapsed. They were simply the last to realize it. Walter hadn't just written them out, he'd written them off. What remains, the shouting didn't follow me outside. I stepped into the cold November sunlight, suitcase in hand, and closed the door on a house that had held so much pain and, in the final days, a strange kind of peace. Behind me, Caleb was yelling. Elaine was demanding lawyers. Melissa was crying for someone to fix everything. But nothing could be fixed, because the damage wasn't in the documents, it was in the years they ignored Walter's voice. The years they waited for him to die, quietly, conveniently, like a task crossed off a list. And when he didn't, when he fought back with grace and cunning, they were shocked. I didn't look back. Patricia had arranged a quiet room for me at a nearby inn. A kettle, a stack of clean towels, a window overlooking a quiet street filled with bare trees. When I arrived, I found a letter waiting. From Walter, it was short. "Jade, you gave me more than time, you gave me a witness, and I hope, in return, I gave you your freedom. Spend it wisely. I read it 3 times. Then I made tea and sat in silence. The world hadn't changed. People like Elaine and Caleb would keep existing. And somewhere, another Walter would sit in a chair waiting for someone to remember him. But now I had a voice. And the courage to use it. Walter's gift wasn't just in the trust funds or legal control. It was in the clarity he offered me about love, about self-worth, about what it means to see and be seen. I stayed at the inn for 3 nights. On the 4th, I booked a ticket to Vermont, to the cabin Walter had left behind, the one they didn't even know existed. There was snow in the trees. The floorboards creaked. The fireplace worked. It smelled like cedar and old pages. I unpacked slowly. No rush, no noise, no one to pretend for. As the fire crackled, I placed Walter's photo on the mantel, not to mourn him, but to thank him. Then I whispered the only thing that felt right. We didn't just survive them. We ended their story and began our own.